working? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, nice to see you. And, okay.
This works too, yeah.
This is working as well? And this is working, yes. Okay.
Per cambiare to change the password, the slides, just that, all right. Okay.
You should. Okay. Okay, I guess let's get started because we are, well, 10 to 4, so we're a bit late. Sorry for that. So I will just give a brief introduction and then I'll give the word to the people here. So just to give you our, let's say, the vibe of this short conference. I've been working on projects related to dementia and Alzheimer, and specifically with European universities. And because I also work in perfumery, I had a friend from University of Maastricht that introduced me to a person which is here today, which is Federica D'Andrea, and then she will introduce more about herself. And she was telling me that actually there is a study of how perfumes or odors are used to stimulate memory. And that was so fascinating, as much as when I met Claudia from Exans in China, I talked about my chat with Federica, because she was sharing with me the projects. And Claudia told me, why don't we bring Federica to Exans? And then, of course, this became, why don't we bring other people to show the work they're doing? So today, we are with these amazing people, and I will briefly introduce them to you. So we have Dr. Desirée Lopis, which is assistant professor in neuropsychology at the Paris-Nanterre University. So Desirée will talk about the olfactory system, which is an overview of the olfactory system at the structural level and of its cognitive functioning. After that, we'll have Dr. Federica D'Andrea, which is a senior lecturer in dementia studies at the Geller Institute of Aging and Memory in West London University. And finally, we'll have Professor Victoria Tischler. She's Professor of Behavioral Science at the University of Surrey, and she will talk about the olfactory stimulation in the care of older people. So I will give the word to Desirée. Off you go.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Sorry. Thank you very much, Adam, for inviting me today. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Yes, as Adam said, I'm an assistant professor in neuropsychology from Paris-Nanterre University in France, and a clinical neuropsychologist myself with an expertise in normal and pathological aging. So I work with people with, Alzheimer's disease more frequently. And today I'm here to talk about the olfactory system and more broadly to introduce the olfaction and its main functions. I hope, yeah, okay.
You can
the slide, okay. So the olfaction, the gestation and the trigeminal system are called the chemical senses because they share a fundamental biological mechanism which is detecting the chemical molecules in our environment, okay? Yes, if you want, you can think of them as our body's chemical labs constantly analyzing the composition of the air you breathe or the food you eat, okay? Olfaction, in particular, is in charge of the detection of odorous molecules carried by the air, and it contributes to regulate eating behavior by influencing, for example, what you eat, when you eat it, how you eat it, etc. It also helps to avoid risk, like spoiled food or environmental dangers, and also it shapes our social interaction more broadly. long despite the chemical senses are the most primitive of sensory systems, yet they are still the ones we understand the least. And there is one main reason for this, which deals with difficulty and complexity. The olfactory system, you know, is physically very hard to reach for scientific, and because, yeah, it is located inside the head, making it really hard to scientists to access and study. Also, smells themselves are incredibly complicated to observe and measure, and you will understand in a few minutes why. So my role today is to give you a glimpse into this overall complexity. We'll start with some vocabulary. From the simplest to the most complex, we have the term odorant, which refers to a chemical substance that causes olfactory stimulation, okay? It's a volatile organic molecules that gain access to the olfactory system. What you perceive is the odor, the perceptive experience you have of a volatile organic molecule, which is, yes, the result of an olfactory stimulation from a single or a set of odorants. However, real-life odors are very complex mixtures of hundreds of different odor molecules, not just one or a set, like hundreds of odor molecules. And each odorous molecule is defined by chemical structure, perceptual identity, and olfactory threshold. So, for example, for the alcohol, you have the ethanol, which is the chemical structure, the name alcohol, and 2 millimole in a liter, which is the olfactory threshold, starting from the point you start perceiving the odor. You also have to keep in mind that minimal changes in the molecule correspond to large perceptual differences. And the concentration, too, impacts the characteristic of an odor, so it's like very, very complex entities. We also have 2 different paths for odorants to reach their final destination. So we have the orthonasal path, in charge to detect smells and fragrances, and the retronasal path, I don't know if I can, yeah, the retronasal path, in charge to detect aromas and flavors. So the information from both paths is blended into a single perception. However, the orthonasal path creates the percept of an external object coming until your nose, while the retronasal path creates the percept of what's in your mouth, concretely. So this adds a great amount of details to the information processed by your tongue, okay? So imagine deodorants floating in the air, reaching this space you see here, and that's what is called the olfactory epithelium, which is the cavity you see that hosts 12 million olfactory receptors in roughly 2.5 square centimeters. This may seem a lot, but in reality it is nothing compared to the same structures in dog. I gave you some data for comparison. So the molecules are then captured by these filaments you see here in yellow, right here, that are connected to what is called olfactory bulb, that you also see in the image. But how does it work exactly? So this is where the complexity reaches its maximum level, okay? Please follow me. So in these filaments, the yellow filaments you saw, there are neurons. Molecules are captured by receptors located in these neurons. Now, each olfactory neuron hosts just one type of olfactory receptor. However, each type of receptor has more or less strong affinities for several odorants. And at the same time, an odorous molecule can more or less strongly activate several different receptors. Also, the neurons bearing the same receptor converge into this round-shaped structure here that you see in different colors, which are called glomeruli. One of this structure is called glomerulus. More of this structure are called the glomeruli within the olfactory bulb. Now, I want you to imagine these tiny round structures, these glomeruli, as a grid of microscopic light bulbs, okay? When you smell an odor, a specific combination of these light bulbs turns on. But your brain doesn't just look at which bulbs are activated. To identify the smell, it will look at 3 specific dimensions. The first one is the intensity. How strongly do these light bulbs activate? Are they dim or super bright? The second one is the duration. How long do they stay active? Is it just a quick flash or a permanent glow? And third, you have the frequency. Do they just fire once or do they pulse over and over again? So it's the combination of space and time which creates what we can call an olfactory signature, okay? Essentially a neural fingerprint for every smell in the universe. So what you see here are 3 distinct activation sequences, just an example to represent the exact neurological signature of a completely different smell. You have, for example, 3 different smells activating in 3 different ways the light bulbs. So what's next? Basically, from the olfactory bulb, we quickly arrive to the brain, and that's the most important feature of the olfactory function, in my opinion, since while all the other sensory information, such as what we see, what we hear, first passes through a structure located in the middle of the brain that you have here. Yes, that structure is called the thalamus. And the thalamus has the role to filter, to clean up, to polish the signal so it's readable for our brain. However, smell is the only sense that completely skips this step. So the olfactory information just hits the brain, raw, unfiltered, in its purest form. It fast tracks into a cerebral path that you're seeing here, in a cerebral path connected with our most basic functions like memory, emotion, and behaviors. And that is exactly why a single smell, a single odor can instantly unlock a memory, a very powerful memory, a very powerful emotion, even before you realize what you're smelling. So while the neuroscience behind smell is incredibly complex, the practical application of it can be very straightforward. And it was quite simple for us, for example, as a researcher in human science, to imagine innovative, pleasant, and minimally invasive therapeutic solution for fragile peoples. And this is where I leave you. I will let my colleague, Federica and Andrea, tell you a little more about that, what we can do with the olfaction to stimulate people in fragile conditions. Sorry.
Thanks, Desirée. So good afternoon, everyone. My colleagues, Dr. Desirée, Lopis, took you on a journey to explore the olfactory pathway and olfactory brain. So now, what next? So how our smell can impact the human experience, in particular smell and memory. So I'm Federica Andrea, and I am a senior lecturer in dementia study at the Cavallari Institute of Aging and Memory at the University of West London. And today I'm going to talk to you about the effect of smell in aging and dementia. Desirée show you the anatomy. So this is now, what I'm going to tell you is what the anatomy produce. So the olfactory signal is direct connect with area of the brain associated with emotion and memory. And that's why smell can trigger memories that are qualitatively different from memory triggered by other sensory cues. And these include, for instance, visual, auditory, or olfactory stimuli. And these memories are more emotionally intense and evocative. And we speak about memory about our past, that in research often we refer to as autobiographic memories. Often these memories also refer as a Proust effect, from the French novelist Marcel Proust, who described in one of his works this strong experience of a memory that of his childhood that was triggered by the smell and the taste of a French cake dipped in a tea. So what Proust described is this strong feeling to be transport to a specific time and space, and this sense of presence and embodiment. So what Proust does is describe neuroscience. Studies that compare the memories triggered by smell with memory triggered by other stimulus, such as verbal, visual, tactile, or music, show that when we compare this memory, if we are looking at the accuracy, so the level of detail of the memory, they are the same. But what makes the memory evoked by smell different is the emotional salience of the memory. And the brain image describe why. As you can see from this image, the area related with emotion are more activated when we trigger and retrieve memory using smell, compare other sensory cue. So that is the reason. And what is important to highlight here is that smell not only enables us to retrieve something, a memory, but also make you feel it again. So it triggered the memory and also triggered the emotion associated with that memory. So here there are other few characteristics of other evoked memories that are quite unique. First of all, they are less frequently thought and talked about. They are associated with high emotional arousal and higher level of positive affect, which means that memory that triggered by smell are more positive than negative. However, we need to always remember that also traumatic or difficult memory can be triggered by smell, and this brings as well the negative emotion associated with that. So that's not the reason why we shouldn't use smell, especially in healthcare, but we need to be aware of that. Another interesting characteristic is the fact that the memory that are triggered by smell often are predominantly to a specific time of our life, childhood and teenagers' years, which is quite unique. There are different theories why, but there is not quite a consensus on the reason. So, considering that olfaction, so smell and olfactory stimulation can trigger autobiographic memory, so memory about our past, and often these memories are positive, there has been an interest to use odor-based interventions, so olfactory stimulation in dementia care. So dementia is an umbrella term describing a syndrome, a neurodegenerative syndrome caused by a variety of brain disease, which can generate cognitive decline. The most common and known symptoms is memory loss, but also difficulties in performing activity of daily living. So In dementia care, one of the most widely used in practice intervention is aromatherapy. Aromatherapy uses essential oil directly applied on the skin surface or through inhalation using vaporizer and diffuser, and has been used to create, for the calming effect that these produce, specifically to reduce responsive behavior, which include, for instance, agitation, irritability, anxiety in people with dementia, as well as improve sleep. So despite these interventions being widely used in practice, there were very limited evidence base on the fact. Therefore, together with colleagues, including Professor Victoria Tischler, we were interested to summarize and map all these evidence in the literature about the use of smell in dementia care, and specifically interested what is the outcome, so what's the impact, and what stimulus and administration methods, so how, in what way smell were delivered. So what we found by looking at 20 papers, studies, overall the interests of these interventions were focused on three main domains: responsive behavior, cognitive function, and physical functioning. So for responsive behavior, there is a mixed finding. So a few studies suggest a positive effect of smell in reduced agitation, anxiety, irritability, but half of the other paper study didn't find the same effect. Similarly, we have for cognitive function with some mixed finding on, for instance, the role of smell to improve problem-solving task. But what was quite strong is the evidence of using smell in trigger autobiographic memories. And one paper focused on self-concept, which is quite interesting. So people exposed on the odor condition, they produce more statement about who they are than those that were in absence of odor condition. And this is important and relevant in dementia because we know as the disease progresses, person may have more memory difficulties and the sense of identity could be somehow lost. And the last one was the physical functioning. So there are, despite very limited, but some positive evidence on the use of smell to improve sleep pattern, food intake, and balance. Regarding the olfactory stimuli, so there was, and the way these olfactory stimuli were delivered, there was a great heterogeneity, with the majority using inhalation and lavender oil. So despite this study couldn't make a very firm conclusion about what's the impact of smell in dementia due to the mixed finding, there are some evidence in favor of using olfactory stimulation in dementia care. So this is also quite relevant considering that as we are aging, we have a reduce of our cognitive, we encounter a reduce of our cognitive function. But the good news is that olfactory pathway, they retain the regenerative capacity, so the ability to be simplistically like consolidate by the exposure to the same to the smell in a very structured and consistent way. So there is a new venue also if we think about prevention of dementia or brain health and quality of life that could be explored. And this is what we are now trying to do by developing and establish a network of people in olfaction aging dementia. This network includes industry, charity, people living with dementia, family members, as well as community members, which all together, and scientists, which all together we are looking at what is the current evidence in research, what are the gaps and what are the priorities, where we need to go, what are the next step. And this is very important because now you will hear from Professor Victoria Tischler that she will tell you more about olfactory training, which is an intervention that, as I said, could be an opportunity to improve our sense of smell. If you're interested to know a little bit more about this network, and maybe to be involved, please feel free to scan the QR code, which is just an expression of interest. It's very a small form. And I can contact you later by email, or if you prefer, you can come and speak with me after the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Federica. Lovely to see everybody here this afternoon. My name is Victoria Tischler. I work at the University of Surrey, where I lead a program of research which focuses on the care of people who are aging and older people living with dementia. And my primary interests are creative activities and interventions and sensory activities, and with a focus on olfactory activities, which is what I'm going to be talking about this afternoon. And that work involves collaboration with a very large health and beauty retailer in the UK and also a fragrance manufacturer. So I'm going to be talking about some of the clinical ways in which we can use smell in the care of older people. As Federica mentioned, we can use what we call olfactory training, which is structured, regular exposure to scent stimulus. For example, sniffing a particular scent for a period of time every day. And we know that that can improve one's sense of smell. And that's also the case that we found in a review of literature for older people as well. So some of the things that review found was that with this olfactory training, the regular exposure to scent, it improved not only cognitive function, so verbal fluency, and that's speaking with less hesitation, working memory, which is the memory that we hold in the short term as we're trying to apply our efforts to completing a task. We also found reductions in depressive symptoms, and interestingly, it can promote cognitive reserve, and that's something where I'm increasingly looking at in midlife. And cognitive reserve refers to maintaining and supporting our brain health as we get older, and hopefully preventing future cognitive decline. So despite some of the promising findings we found in the research using olfactory training, we know that smell-based activities are not routinely used in the care of older people compared to other sensory activities which involve, for example, vision or sound, if you think of things like music and art activities. And I think that may be due to lack of awareness around the importance of olfaction, as we've heard, how olfaction works, how powerful it is in terms of the neuroanatomy and the impact that it has on our mood, but also that we haven't got still a really huge evidence base around how olfactory activities can benefit older people. So that's the kind of work that we're involved in, and hopefully building that evidence around that. So this area makes up a large proportion of my research activity. I'm going to illustrate by showing you some of my past and current research projects. So I first started looking at research on olfaction over a decade ago. It was through a random conversation with someone that works for Boots. Any of you who have visited the UK will know of a Boots pharmacy. Boots is ubiquitous on the British High Street. It's a health and beauty retailer, but the company is actually 177 years old. And what I found when I spoke to this person who worked at Boots was that they have this huge repository of over 5,000 items which go back to the inception of the company, and that includes all the formulations for all the ointments, the potions, the fragrance products, the makeup, everything. They have a record of how to make it. They also have lots of original packaging. Their design team can make packaging according to a certain age group. They also have optical equipment, all kinds of really interesting multisensory objects, which I thought given what I know about museum handling objects and how we know that people find it stimulating to hold interesting objects which may be held in a museum and to handle those, I thought it would be interesting to expose older people living in care homes to interesting objects which also have a strong olfactory component. So that was the idea for the very first study that we did. So we arranged a number of themed boxes, which we called memory boxes, and we took them into care homes, and we every week for 6 weeks presented items in those boxes to older people with dementia. And they included items like soap, makeup, lots of things that people would recognize, including things as they would have been in the 30s or 40s. So older people would recognize some of those objects where perhaps, some younger people wouldn't. And what we found was that it was really positive, the way that the older people responded to those items. So there was a lot of emotional engagement, a lot of enthusiasm for handling those objects, using sight, also using touch. If the object had a sound, things which have a rattle, for example. And importantly, people were able to smell the items as well. So we found there was an element of cognitive stimulation, people's mood would improve, and there was this very spontaneous recall of memories of the type that Federica was talking about, autobiographical memories, important things from people's past related to their sense of identity, the job role they did, where they used to live, where they used to travel, their important relationships, and this really enlivened older people living with dementia and had a very powerful impact. So there was this meaningful storytelling that these olfactory items were able to provoke, which I felt was really interesting in terms of the research. Now I'm going to share with you a short video where you can see some older people interacting with some of these objects. So if I could have the video played now, please. Smell's really powerful in triggering particularly autobiographical memories, so memories from previous parts of our life. So I'm interested in seeing how we can use the Boots archive to recreate smells or introduce smells that will create really positive stimulation for people living with dementia.
Well, Boots is a well-known name, approaching 170 years old, so people have grown up for generations, really familiar with the brand. Boots' involvement in these sessions is to bring along our memory boxes from items from our archive. They're things that also you might buy at a particular point in your life, so going on holiday, when you become a parent. So there might be moments that are particularly memorable.
Good morning. We've got lots of things for you to see, to look at, and to smell, and to remember.
But we also have formulations, so these are the recipes for our products that we were selling in the 1920s, so we have recreated some of those authentic smells. Again, a way of hopefully maybe triggering some conversation.
We're going out together for 4 years, engaged for 2 years, married for 57 years. Our marriage is now here rather than anywhere else. It's learning how to deal with this bit that's tough, but we will.
It brought people out of their shell. I heard people speaking. It brought in conversation. Angela really enjoyed the handbag. I loved her first comment, which she said, it's plastic. And then she commented later about the jewellery bit not being real.
Things that are recognisable, so they're familiar, and that sparks really interesting conversations about taking photos, for example, or male grooming, or getting ready to go out.
He had a fantastic time. He was singing, he was happy, he really, really enjoyed it.
So I'm hoping the learning from the memory boxes can benefit more people. One of my students is working intensively with items from the Boots archive to develop an activity which she's going to then trial in different care settings where people with dementia live.
It was just a lovely experience that I would never miss if it was offered again and again and again.
So after that research was finished, I then went on to do some archival research with the Boots objects and identified particularly olfactory-rich items with a view to providing guidance for family caregivers or professional caregivers. And Federica and I have co-authored some guidance to try and encourage people to use olfactory-rich items and to show them that it can be done quite easily, even with things that you have at home. I've then gone on to work with Givaudan, and I'm going to share some findings from an olfactory board game that Givaudan Foundation devised during the COVID-19 pandemic to address the social isolation that older people in care homes were experiencing. So they included about 20 of these little tins you can see here, and you're welcome to have a look at these afterwards. So they're like wax, they're fragrance infused into wax inside the boxes. The board game can be played in a variety of ways, but I was quite keen to see what the impact was with care home residents playing the board game with care staff. So the fragrances are quite familiar, things like coffee, lavender, and again, using the same kind of format we used with Boots, memory boxes. We had themes for each week, things like sweet shop, childhood, going on holiday, universal themes that most people can relate to. And the aims were to encourage people to interact socially and also to evoke memories. So I wanted to understand if there was a potential therapeutic impact of this novel board game. So what we found, again, was very positive. This study was led by one of my clinical psychology trainees. People found out more about each other. People were able to connect over discussion around particular smells. Again, there was this improvement in mood and enjoyment. There was lots of laughter, lots of storytelling around smells. People spontaneously were remembering things. So, for example, one of the older men taking part grew up in Cyprus, and he was talking a lot about one of the smells in the tins is of olives, and he was talking about different types of olive trees and talking with authority about the different smells of olive oil. We also found out that people were able to learn new facts about each other that they didn't know through having this olfactory stimulus, and the game was really accessible as well. And just to finalize, to talk about this program of work is ongoing, so we're continuing to develop the research evidence. I've now got a whole team of students and colleagues who are working in this area. Lots of the research has been done with white Western populations. So, for example, someone within my lab is looking at Polish diaspora and how we might adapt the memory box for people from that population. Another clinical trainee is looking at adapting the guidance to make care staff feel more confident in handling olfactory activities, to encourage them to use these activities and to create a legacy. And we're also looking at people in middle age. So, for example, women experiencing menopause and looking at using olfactory products to support their brain health and to prevent cognitive decline. So thank you very much for your attention. It would be lovely to have some discussion and questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you just switch to the next slide so you can also contact if you want directly? Okay, yeah, this one here. So if you want to contact directly Desirée, Victoria, or Federica, you can do it. And I will go to ask some questions. If there are any questions, you can just raise your hand. Okay, I can see one there, and then one there. So I'll go first for the gentleman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks a lot for the presentation. And just saw at the end that these all these the result of the study. First of all, do you want to enlarge this to other countries? Because for me, the idea of the smells that they're a bit also cultural. So, if you, yeah.
Yeah, as I hinted, I'm very aware that often the populations are not culturally diverse. One of the studies that I didn't mention is we're adapting this olfactory board game with colleagues in Sweden and Germany because we appreciate that certain smells may have different cultural specificity. So I think there's a lot more work that could be done about diversity of research.
Okay, there were two questions right there. So one in the front and the lady on the back. Who wants first is okay.
Thank you very much. Vanessa British, but from the US. I used to work in neurorehabilitation, but also in dementia as a healthcare professional It's very much about personhood. In fact, when we spray perfume on ourselves, it's about personhood. And we know that activities honoring personhood means that people are able to sustain generalized function with dementia for longer, and their brain atrophies less. So keep smelling and spraying your perfumes, because it's going to help you stop getting brain atrophy. So I want to say thank you so much for that. I do actually have a question. The talks today have been very much about the effects of scent to our well-being and so on and so forth. I would love to know when we are in altered state of either, neuroregulation. So, for example, if we are in one mood, do we perceive a scent one particular way versus we smell it a week later, we've had a stimulus that puts us in a different mood. How do we perceive that scent? Does anybody know whether that research is being done? Because I do believe people perceive scents differently according to what their mood, their fatigue, what they've eaten, etc. I'd love to know. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question. I guess me or maybe Federica, we can respond to this. I mean, it's not the center of my research interest, but yes, I know a literature about emotional contagion. So as Federica said before, whenever we smell an odor, there are a lot of experience in terms of memory, emotions that emerge. So I don't know the exact details of the experience, but I guess if we smell an odor which have been associated with positive events or positive emotion, I guess the emotion can emerge and just, yes, replace the emotion the person had before. I don't know if Federica can...
No, definitely. So first of all, thanks for the questions. This is very interesting. And to point out the importance of personalize.
Yeah.
This is all about our work, especially in dementia care. To have an effective intervention, we have to make sure to tailor this to the individual. Not everything fits all, so this is a key. Regarding your question, I think this is a very interesting question, especially with people living with dementia, because people with dementia, they have fluctuation. And the fluctuation can be cognitive, can be also mood. And I had some people living with dementia to tell me, some day the same smell is pleasant, the next day actually it irritates me, distress me. So it is a very interesting. What is underpinning? I cannot fully answer that, but definitely there is this element. Again, if we are thinking about intervention, we need to take in consideration, and this is part of personalize the intervention to the individual. And now with technology, we could perhaps collect this information, change in the mood, change in this overall symptoms of dementia across the day or across the week or longer time frame, and perhaps adapt based also the qualitative, so what the person can share with us, the intervention, and then also the smells. But yeah, I think there we should further investigate this specific element. Thanks for the question.
Okay, and then there was the lady in the front. Other question?
As I understand dementia, one of the first signs of it is your sense of smell going. So where does that leave it in therapy terms? Because if you've lost the hardware, what's the point of the software?
Well, I'll make an initial comment, maybe one of the others would like to come in as well. But there's more than 100 different types of dementia. And yes, you're right, loss of smell is a biomarker for Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common type of dementia. So yeah, it's a bit hard to generalize to all people with dementia. And we naturally will lose some smell as we age as well, like all our senses deteriorate to some extent.
Can I also add? So I think this is again, a relevant question, because we saw that half of the population, 65 and over, they have a partial or completely loss of their sense of smell. So the question is, why then we use olfactory stimulation in dementia? And an answer is that research suggests that the people with dementia, they have a decline in the identification and discrimination. So it's about recognition. We have the cognitive aspect that impact, well, they are almost bilateral, but also often the cognitive abilities impact the way the person elaborates and they recognize, decoding the information. But we have what we call the implicit impact. So smell also, when we are not aware about that, so think about this room. So we are here, it's full of smell, and this room probably has a specific smell. Now probably we are not aware of that because we are here since more than 20 minutes, but this still impact us and inform how we are behavior. So still has an impact on the decision that we are making. The problem is that often we are unaware of this, we are underestimate this, so we think, oh, you know, because we cannot see concretely the smell, so we don't think that this has an impact on us. But still, even if we are not able to recognize what smell it is, and the kind of activity that we do in our research, also with Desirée collaborating now with a PhD project to develop a reminiscence intervention using olfactory smell, and with Vittoria, all the work with boots, is never to ask the people with dementia factual information. We are not asking, what is this smell? Or to denominate that. We are more asking, what makes you feel? Is it a familiar smell? It does trigger something. So it's more an open question. We are not there to put a person like testing. Yeah. I don't know if Vittoria wants to.
I was just going to add too that some of that work that I did in the archive was to choose things with more intense smells, and sometimes we can change the concentration as well to compensate for some of the olfactory loss, if there is some, as well as some of these other factors that Federica's referred to.
Yes, just to complete, it's true in dementia, in aging, even in normal aging, we also have an elevation of the threshold. This means that, yes, you need more concentration of the same perfume to detect the perfume. That's true. But what said Federica is also very true. I mean, we just adapt the odors, the concentration to the population we working with. So yeah, it's from parts of the personalization of the therapeutic. So
I was just going to mention too that often the smells are misidentified, but that's not the point. It's not about getting it right or wrong. It's about what that evokes, which may be a feeling, maybe a memory, maybe something else. And you don't really know. Everyone's different and every day is different, just like all of us.
Can I just also add something else? This is, I think, it's a very interesting, fascinating. I don't know, I'm very passionate about this topic because it's not only, you know, the point is that we can stimulate, and this stimulation doesn't have only conveying verbal element. So the beauty of smell, and this is why I decided to focus on that specific sense, is that we can use this as a non-verbal channel to connect with the person at the more emotional level, which is the last thing that is lost in the process and progress of dementia. So there is also opportunity there, even if we know that as we are aging, we lose our sense of smell. Or partially, yeah, exactly. So there is a way that we can compensate for that.
I think there was that lovely bit in the video where that man was smelling. It was a shave stick, but you could see he closed his eyes and he really went into himself, and that was a really good illustration of a non-verbal response, a really powerful response, but he didn't say anything.
I couldn't end this conversation because it came very beautifully. So we're over time right now, so if you have any questions, Desirée, Vittoria and Federica are here. So if you want to follow up, we can follow up. And well, first of all, thank you to Valentina and to Claudia to invite Desirée, Federica and Vittoria, and of course, thank you to Desirée, Vittoria and Federica for being here. It's been a very special moment for us. Thank you very much.